Fight!
Okay, welcome back to Fighting with Numbers, nerds. I am Rob Moreno, aka Bobby Knuckles. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even on YouTube now. This is on YouTube at Fighting with Numbers. The social handles are at the Robio, but you can find Fighting with Numbers on YouTube now. Search for it that way. And we are back here, UFC 325. This one's a little different than last week, a lot less going on. There's only 6 fights modeled, 3 fights broken down. But that doesn't mean there isn't value to be found, right? There's still bets to be made every week. It just means we have to be a little more patient, a little more disciplined, and very selective here. The card goes down in Australia, 5 p.m. Eastern start time, so a little different than last week. It's headlined by featherweight title rematch between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes, and a very violent co-main event between Dan Hooker and Benoit Saint-Denis. I'm very excited about that one. But enough about me. What about the model? Yeah, last week, the model, after a couple fight cancellations, eyebrow raise on a couple of those, the model still went 6-2, by the way, to start the year. Not a bad start. We did miss in the main event with Paddy Pimblett. All hats off to Justin Gaethje. He went in there like a car crash out of hell and got the job done. Brand new interim lightweight title. We'll see what happens from there. But hey, on the card, early underdogs did what they were supposed to do, and they got us through the rest of the night. So, with all that said, here we go. UFC 325. We turn the page. Let's get it going. You want to see the model? Here's the model. We're going to start off with Rafael Faziev versus Mauricio Ruffy. No R's allowed in this conversation. And it should be a pretty intense matchup. It already is on paper, let me tell you. Fiziev finally snapped a rough stretch with a decision win over Ignacio Bahamondes back in June of 2025. Before that, it was a 3-fight skid, and the question now is whether that was a true bounce back or just a pause, right? On the other side, Mauricio Ruffy comes in as one of those classic fight nerd darlings, huh? He is epitome of a fight nerd. He's 3-1 in the UFC, but that one loss matters because it was a submission loss to Benoit Saint-Denis back in September. That's important context because it exposed what his game can crack to. Mauricio will have a 4-inch reach advantage, and stylistically, he knows how to use it. But when we check the model, neither guy really separates. Fiziev sits at 49% XR percentage, Ruffy at 54%. Neither one shines. One is even below 50%. I mean, I don't give out 2 red flags here, but we're saying round to round, it's a 50-50 shot. It's basically coin flip territory, right? Fiziev still gets the strength of schedule nod, I will say that. He's been in there with absolute killers, including twice against current interim lightweight champ, Justin Gaethje. Ruffy's toughest test was Saint-Denis most recently, and that didn't end very well either. So, on the feet, both guys are willing to trade, as you can see in the numbers. Maybe a little too willing, if I'm being honest. Fiziev lands 4.77 significant strikes per minute, but with a 0 differential, meaning he's eating just as much as he's giving. Ruffy actually lands less volume, 3.39 per minute, but carries plenty of power to pack with it. 3 knockdowns in just 4 UFC fights and hasn't been knocked down himself even once. If this fight goes anywhere other than the feet, it's probably Fiziev initiating it. His takedown accuracy sits at 73%. Let me show you that on the screen. There we go. And while he's not a dominant grappler, he at least has, a safety valve if things get uncomfortable for him. Ruffy's takedown defense is listed at 81%. He's seen 16 total takedowns in his UFC career, but the context around that matters because 10 of those attempts came in one fight in his last fight against Benoit Saint-Denis, who lives in that space. Benoit landed 3, actually landed the only takedowns on Mauricio so far. So when we run it through the model, we get the slightest lean towards Rafael Faziev, but it's not enough to justify any action before everyone starts shaking their head at me. The market agrees with that too. You'll find Fiziev anywhere from -120 all the way to +105, depending on the book. And honestly, that's the answer right here for this fight. This is a pass, and sometimes passing is the sharper move you can make. I'm not saying this fight isn't worth betting. Just for me personally, the model sees it as 50-50. The odds see it as 50-50. I'm not willing to play with those numbers, so it's a pass. I'm sorry to pass on the first fight of the night, but this is a small card, and I got to give you something, and sometimes that type of information can be more helpful than just telling you which way to go. So, pass on the first one. I'll be watching as a fan instead. Now, if you're here for violence, this is your fight. Dan Hooker versus Benoit Saint-Denis. It's the reason I'm here, baby. Dan Hooker's back. And as always, chaos follows the man. He's coming off a submission loss to Arman Tsarukyan just a couple months ago, November of last year. And that raises the first red flag for me. It's a very quick turnaround for a guy who's been in the style of fights he's been in, and already 36 years old. It was a grappling heavy loss. But looking at the stats, I mean, Arman Tsarukyan still landed 42 significant strikes on him in 2 rounds, 69 total strikes, took him down twice, submitted him pretty quickly. That's a concern for me for a guy who was on the receiving end of most of this fight in such a quick turnaround. Prior to that, I will acknowledge Dan Hooker was riding a 3-fight win streak, but we know the deal with Dan. One loss costs him a little bit of something in every single fight. Now, across from him, Benoit Saint-Denis, the god of war, 19 professional fights for the man, only one decision, and currently on a 3-fight win streak capped by a 16-second knockout of Beneil Dariush. Now, I know that was also not that long ago. I think that was also in November, but the man's 30 years old. It was a 16-second fight, and it wasn't a lot of effort from him. Wasn't a lot of output. It feels like he's really hitting his stride right now, and that man is hungry for a title shot. The model reflects who they are. Benoit Saint-Denis, 71% XR percentage. He doesn't go to decisions very often, at least. There's been one. But even in the rounds he's in, he wins those rounds, even if it's an eventual finish. He wins rounds. Dan Hooker, 57% XR percentage. Yes, he has a lot of finishes as well, 9 total in the UFC, but he's still losing rounds along the way. So even in those finishes, he loses on paper. So just remember that gap will matter. Dan Hooker, still a striker at heart, though. He spends 69% of his time at distance, landing 4.89 significant strikes per minute with 9 knockdowns across his UFC career. The problem is he doesn't win rounds clean, and he absorbs a lot of damage. Benoit Saint-Denis mixes his game much better. He spends only 42% at distance, but lands 5.07 significant strikes per minute with a positive differential. And when his fights hit the mat, that's where the real separation can happen. BSD holds a 79% control rate in clinch and ground time, with nearly half of that time spent in dominant positions. Hooker's takedown defense is solid at 77%, but Saint-Denis doesn't need perfect accuracy. He chains attempts and something breaks in his opponent eventually. The model loves Benoit Saint-Denis here, 78.09 win probability, with odds sitting at around minus 330. It's about the same win probability, actually at 76% from the books. That price, that's what ends up killing the straight bet here, but it doesn't kill the angle overall. This is where props come into play. This is where we try to shorten the price. As I mentioned, this isn't going to be a big betting card. So as far as like hoping to loop him into a parlay somewhere, none of that exists for me. What I have to find is another way to put Benoit Saint-Denis on my betting slip. Given BSD's style and Dan Hooker's willingness to stand in the fire, this fight not seeing the scorecards makes a lot of sense. At play, the round total is currently at 1.5, so under 1.5 is at plus 145. If you think this goes less than 7.5 minutes, I think that's live. Benoit Saint-Denis by finish, minus 125. That's also live as well. Now, one thing I will look at later in the week as those props develop is alternate round props. That 1.5 does make me a little nervous. So if I can find maybe a 2.5, under 2.5 at a fair price, considering 1.5 is underpriced at plus 145, I think under 2.5 could come in pretty favorable from the sports books. We'll see later in the week, but either way, I'm back in BSD some way, somehow this weekend. Give the man a title shot after the lightweight interim gold gets settled. All right, well, it's main event time. And yes, it is a quick rematch for these guys. Some say maybe not deserved properly by Diego Lopes. Hey, who am I to make these claims? Who am I to make these fights? I'm just a spectator. I'm just a guy that punches numbers in a spreadsheet. Alexander Volkanovski defends the featherweight belt for the first time in his second title reign, once again against Diego Lopes. Their first fight back in April 2025 wasn't particularly close, in my opinion. Volk won a clear unanimous decision. I believe he stole a round on most judges' scorecards. I believe one judge gave him 2 rounds, but for the most part, it was all Volk all the time for 5 rounds. Volk hasn't fought since. At 37 years old, that time off could be a blessing. or the thing that everyone fears when it comes to aging champions, of course, could be at play as well. Diego Lopes didn't wait around, and I respect that. He stayed active. He scored a knockout win over Gene Silva back in September, the leaping Gene Silva. And at 31 years old, Diego, man, he's hungry, durable, and fully willing to walk into chaos. He walks into the fire. Now, from a number standpoint, the fight, it does favor the champ still. Alexander Volkanovski, 78% XR percentage. Diego Lopes, 53%. Unfortunately, Volk wins a lot of rounds. Diego does not. Diego walks into the fire. And let me tell you the rest of the numbers because that's the reason he sits at such a low XR percentage. If the fight's going to go to decision, I don't think it goes Lopez's way. Now, the story there in that XR percentage is called round control. That's what's happening. Lopes fights like a warrior, but warriors don't always win rounds on paper, especially when they're getting hit a ton. Volkanovski landed 158 significant strikes in their first meeting, more than double what Lopes landed on Volk. Yet, let's remember, Lopes was never knocked down, and he's never been knocked down, and he's never been finished in his UFC career. That durability does matter. Striking wise is still clear. Volkanovski, 6.18 significant strikes landed per minute with a 2.82 differential. Very clean striking from Volk. We know that. Diego, it's chaos. 4.36 significant strikes per minute with a negative 0.41 differential. So he's eating more than he's dishing out. And we've seen that in his last fight. Yes, I will remember Volk's chin has been tested twice, right? He's been knocked out twice in his UFC career. But let's put some context around that. It matters. One came on short notice at a higher weight class, right, against Islam Makhachev, and that was a head kick, by the way. And the other was against Ilia Topuria, arguably the best knockout artist in the sport right now. So let's give Volk some credit for those knockouts. On the mat, guess what? Volk still has the tools. 80% control rate in clinch and ground time. He has scored 31 takedowns, low accuracy, but very steady attempts. I believe he attempts around 2.17 per 5 minutes. Lopes does defend very well, the takedowns, 75% takedown defense. He did defend most of Alex's attempts in the last fight. Alex only landed, I believe, one. But even forcing him to think about grappling slows his pressure down. The model, it liked him last time. It likes him this time. It remains very bullish on Alexander Volkanovski. In the last fight, we were able to grab him at minus 125. That was a great price. Now he's sitting at around minus 145, minus 155. The model gives him a 78.86% win probability. His current odds imply a 59 to 60% win probability. So there's value there to be held. Now, yes, I'm not blind. Age is a concern here. Absolutely. But if you're going to trust an aging champion, trust one who's smart, disciplined, and who maybe took the proper time off to reset and recover himself. At this number, the model still sees value. And when I'm talking about a guy like Alexander Volkanovski at minus 145, I'm talking about someone who many claim, not just me, many talk about it this way, many claim him to be one of the greatest featherweight champions of all time. So at minus 145, in a fight we've already seen him win, I'll take that price. Yes, age is always a concern. I understand. We just saw Derek Lewis look every bit of 41 years old last week. Trust me, I know. I know what 41 years old feels like. But can Alexander Volkanovski hold Father Time away one last time? I'm hoping he can. And I'm thinking he can. So that's UFC 325. It's a very small card, short podcast for the week, selective spots, and no reason to force any action just because fights are on the calendar. We are very early in the year. We are very early into the UFC schedule. No need to start firing your bankroll away. We're up right now. Why risk too much? As always, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. All of it at The Robbio. Links will be in the description. The video version of the pod will be live on YouTube. If you're watching it, thank you. Make sure you hit subscribe somewhere down there. And you can find written breakdowns every single week as well at fightnumbers.substack.com. Those are free. You can subscribe there, put your email in. Poof, that shows up in your inbox every single week for free. It's got a full model report. It's got other fights that I didn't break down, but that may still have some value in their win probability. So make sure you check those out. Once again, I am Rob Moreno, aka Bobby Knuckles. Trust the numbers, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, Bobby.
Fight!